Yeah, you know you've normalized.
Good, good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome. You are the early birds that catch the worm, the first 20 in the room. I wish I could give you a prize, but the prize is knowing that will get all of the information from the beginning. Um, yeah, who do we have here? We have a nice mixture of people. I even have to go into page 2 to see. So welcome. Um, if you feel like saying hello, you can pop it in the chat. You can say which municipality or organization you're from, um, and you can let us know if you have any questions. Um, let's see who we've got here. Bega from Umsunduzi. Good to see you here. It's filling up quickly. Here we've got George Lotta and Marissa. Overstrand, well represented. Just to let you know, since you are already in the meeting, I have sent an email to most people that have registered. It's got an Excel tool in it, and we're going to be doing an exercise with that later in the day. So if you haven't received that during the first hour or so in the morning, please just let me know, and then we can make sure that we get that to you. We're thinking of doing a little bit of an interactive exercise after the break. Good morning. It seems people are coming in. While we wait for a few people to join, I think we'll give everyone about 5 minutes or so. We're also going to launch Megan, I'll do the poll, so don't worry. We've got just 3 questions just to get a feel for how confident everyone is with their tariff design. So while we're waiting, while you having a sip of coffee, just let us know how confident you are with your cost of supply tariff design. If you have done a tariff impact analysis, if you know how to do that, or if that's something that you still need to learn a bit more. And then also, this will be the best one. What's your biggest challenge that you have found with cost of supply, or the tariff design part of it? If you find that it's you don't understand the tool, or if it's could be anything. Maybe you have some political challenges, maybe it depends. But yeah, it would be interesting to hear what municipalities are are feeling about tariff design. It will definitely help us with our training that's coming up in a few weeks. We've got a week-long online training in a similar sort of format to how we've been doing it. And we'll be going through the whole cost of supply tool from start to finish. And that will include tariff design. So if there are problems you have with tariff design, especially if we don't address those today, we'll hope to address them in the coming weeks. It's also good news. It's only August, so we're not panicking to submit to NERSA just yet. But ideally, I know for the municipalities that I've worked with before, you don't want to be stressing in late March to try and get your tariff submissions done. I can see that I've got a lot of undelivered emails to that I sent that tool to.
Mm.
I think in many
There's
cases, sorry, Megan.
there's no way of putting it in a place where people can use a link to it, hey?
Uh, Unfortunately, it seems that Teams doesn't like us to
Yeah.
to drop things in there. But um, we'll see, because we are going to have a break before we jump into that tool. So during that break, I can make sure that we find out who needs to who still needs to get it. But the room is filling up nicely, which is good. I also think depending on your municipality, you might not be allowed to receive attachments depending on who's emailed you. So sometimes it's an IT policy. All right. So I see Audrey says she's received the tool. That's good stuff. So it has worked for some people. Shamila says you'll be in and out. Don't worry. We have recorded the session, and for those of you that aren't aware, we've put the recordings on YouTube, and every Friday after the Thursday, I send out an email to everyone who's attended with a recap of the day, the presentation, and the recording. So if you go onto YouTube and you go onto the Sustainable Energy Africa YouTube page, you'll see our videos. We've got a whole bunch that actually take you through how to do all of these different steps in the cost of supply tool, but it also recaps some of these deep dives that we've done. So if you aren't able to stay for the whole session, don't worry. We're not doing CPD points, so you're not going to miss out. I see Shamila. Oh yes. So sorry if my dog barking. So I'm not sure the people that have just joined, if you're able to see the poll, but please fill that in. I think we've got about 14 or so responses so far. It would be nice to get a few more just before we start, and then give everybody a minute or two more. We've got about 68 people in the room. We had over 200 registrations, so but I know
Nick, can I
sometimes,
check?
yeah.
Can people who joined later still see that poll?
Let's see um, who's just joined. Otherwise, what I'll do, I can relaunch it. Um, okay, let's see. I've reopened it. It should be popping up for those of you that haven't seen it. But basically, what we're seeing so far is, in terms of confidence for cost of supply tariff design, it's leaning more towards not being so confident. So then that's good that you're here, because this will hopefully improve that a bit. Are you able to do a tariff impact analysis? There's quite a few people saying no. So that's something we'll hopefully teach you today. And then this is an interesting one. What is the biggest challenge? Confusion is one of them. Getting a reliable consultant. Phased implementation. Yeah, interesting. Cross subsidies, that's a good one. And costing was a big one. Expensive tariffs. Okay, so I think probably time to get underway. So please continue to fill in the poll and as people join, but I think we'll get the session started. Okay, so Megan, can you see my
Yeah.
screen?
Yep,
All
it's
right,
perfect.
perfect. Perfect. So everyone, welcome officially to our tariff design session in the cost of supply tool. as you know, it's some work we've been doing with the Sagen program and with Solga and working closely with NERSA to try and build the capacity of municipalities and everyone in the industry when it comes to cost of supply. And today, as I mentioned, the session is on tariff design. So we'll get into the importance of tariff design. And then shortly after that, we'll get into how to actually do it in the tool. And because it can be quite intense, we'll break it up with a comfort break and a Kahoot, so you can get those competitive juices flowing, and then hear from a municipality about how their tariff design process goes. And then we'll go a bit into the tariff impact analysis, which is a fairly new feature that many of you wouldn't have worked with before, but it's quite good. Megan, since you're
Yes.
taking over now, do you want me to drive the slides, or would you prefer to do it on your
If you
side?
can, I'd prefer to do it on my side. Is that a
That's fine.
challenge?
No, that's
Okay.
fine. Then you can share.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I have to pick it up. So sorry, this was a bit slow of me. I need to just open it still. Give me 2 seconds, Nick.
No problem. Just a quick request. If you haven't received the tool, but someone, maybe one of your colleagues has, could you get them to forward it to you? And then I'll try in the meantime during the break to forward it to the rest of them.
And Nick, just while I'm
Yeah?
calling this up, maybe if you could also just make it clear to people that the tool you're talking about is a tool for an exercise, not a
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a
So
pre-populated tool.
I'm trying to show, sorry, Nick, there we go. Okay, window, got it. I'm hoping I've got the right one. There we go. And then I'll just put it on. Okay, so sorry about that slight delay. So just a very warm welcome to everybody in the room. Just to let you know, I think the regulators might be interested. I'm actually sitting in the regulator's office up in Eswatini, and the reason you're not seeing Zibusiso or Candice on today's webinar is because they're part of the team that's sitting in the boardroom here, busy doing we're busy with the launch really of the online platform, so the embedded generation online platform that many of the municipalities in the room here are familiar with. And what's really exciting is that the regulator in Eswatini has sort of developed one for the whole country. They're going to be the host of it, and as you know, they only have one utility, so it's quite a lot easier. Anyway, it's very exciting to be up here, and that's where I'm coming to you in right from Mbabane, and I'm going to be talking to you about the importance of tariff design this morning. So these images we're all familiar with them. There's stop Mohali City, ridiculous tariff increase. That's an AfriForum one. There's, we've got AfriForum on one hand, we've got the DA taking a municipality to court to block the electricity tariff hike. And then in the middle, we've got ANC mayor from eThekwini also sort of revising the proposed tariff increases and bringing them down because they're considered too high. So this is against a background where, as we get to analyze more and more of your cost of supply data, we know, in fact, that municipalities are under recovering. This under recovery is anything from 10 to 20%. It's a little bit dependent on the methodology, which we're going to talk to you about next week. And it's probably not as severe as we think it is, but it is still sitting at around about a 10% under recovery. So you guys are sitting between what they would call a rock and a hard place, because you're not recovering sufficient revenue to keep your utility going, At the same time, you've got citizens out there, and between you and the citizens are politicians, who feel very strongly about electricity prices, and we're going to see that hotting up for the rest of the year. And the fact that people feel strongly about electricity prices is very understandable, because we are all customers as well as being utilities and regulators. And we're all have experienced the fact that since 2008, South Africa has seen a 900% increase in electricity prices. So, this is way above inflation. And uh, there are households struggling to afford this. There's small businesses who are struggling to kind of keep going, and of course, small businesses are who provide employment for the households that are then struggling to pay the bills. So electricity ties us all together in a very interesting way, and it's exactly this complex balancing of prices being too high or being too low, people struggling to afford it, but the utility needs the reliability of the grid. It's exactly this that the space of tariffs speaks into. So we are going to be talking about that today. Um, where does it fit into cost of supply? Well, the kind of basic building blocks of the cost of supply is that it first establishes the revenue requirement. It goes through a whole lot of loops, getting that cost allocation so that it knows exactly which customers drive the costs that make up the revenue requirement. And then there's the exercise of revenue recovery. And this is where we're going to focus in today. And I think there's two elements to revenue recovery. The one is establishing the cost basis of revenue recovery. And that's really where this term cost reflectivity fits in. And we'll talk quite a lot about that this morning. And then the second element is when you actually get tariffs set and approved and sent out into the public space. And the establishing cost reflectivity is really it's this what we call the cost question, and it's really setting out what is an efficient sort of set of costs in order to run the business effectively, and it enables the defensible tariffs. On the other side of that coin is the revenue question, and that is really a question not so much of the kind of the science of putting together your costs and allocating them to customers based on some of the engineering algorithms. This is a question of distributional impact. So that is a kind of economic term to say who bears the cost. So if we were to take straight cost reflectivity and dump that on customers, it would probably, well, in some countries, it's brought governments down. We have to really look at the social side of this and the economic side of this. What can people afford? And how is the best way to structure the tariff so that we get the revenue we need, but we also protect people socially so that they can participate in the system. So this is what they call a policy and a fiscal question. Who bears the burden of the transition as we go forward? So looking at, some people always think of Shirley Salvaldi, who always says cost of supply is a science and designing tariffs is really an art. And it is an art, but you're not, like a sort of artist with a blank slate. You are given some principles and guidelines when it comes to tariff design. The principles are really fairly global, right? So on the one hand, and they're logical, if you know what I mean. So on the one hand, tariffs should be high enough to make sure that you are able to continue to run your utility and to expand it and modernize it and grow it. And this is really around system reliability. So making sure that that system is available to customers, to the economy. We have learned through load shedding that when the system isn't available, the cost is really astronomical. And, there are facts and figures that prove that now. And the cost is way higher than the cost of people paying for a reliable system. We also need to attract private investment. So I think that's also became very clear in South Africa. with Eskom debt, we weren't really in a position for the state to keep raising the kind of capital that the system needs to expand and grow and modernize. So this really covers the principles of what you call revenue sufficiency, which is one of the global principles of pricing, and economic efficiency. So economic efficiency is really saying, is the system giving the right signals to people so that they invest sensibly? And that's really around attracting private investment, whether it's at utility scale, or at even the behind the meter scale. You know, you don't want people putting in private systems if it's really an inefficient way to meet our electricity needs. Then there's the well, before I get on to equity, let's just say that this, on the one hand, the high enough, there needs to be balanced with the low enough. So we need to be able to continue having, energy is a critical input to the economy. And if it gets too expensive and too costly, that comes at the cost of economic growth and productivity. So we want to be able to attract private investment, but balance that growth with making sure the economy has a reliable source of energy, but also an affordable source of energy. And this comes into all sorts of things like global competitiveness and so on. Um, this is still a monopoly system, and we want to prevent excessive profits to utilities, and in the case of liberalizing the market, to private investors. So you're kind of balancing the interests of utilities and consumers. And those are the other side of the coin of revenue sufficiency and economic efficiency. And then we get on to equity. This is electricity sits in this awkward place where the Constitution says it is a trading service, but it also recognizes that it is a basic service. It's also, so it's a constitutional right for people to participate in the system and to be able to have access to affordable electricity. So the other thing you have to do is to protect the interests of low income communities. And then lastly, well, it's not the final one, but fairness. Everyone in the system must be treated fairly, and that doesn't mean that a low income customer but must be treated in the same way as an industrial customer. What it means is that all industrial customers should be treated the same. So whether they have solar on their roofs or not, they should not in any way be discriminated against. And then lastly, simplicity. So we know that within a customer group, you might lump together some users who have slightly different consumption patterns. But in the interest of simplicity, we create one tariff category. You can't create a tariff category for every single customer. And the balancing act here, as you can see, is that the artistry is really, well, what is sufficient, and what is sufficient for the utility to remain modern and optimal and reliable, but at the same time, the economy should be able to grow. These two things are totally interconnected, and yet they are slightly in conflict with each other. So this is why our regulators have to have the wisdom of Solomon. Okay, so that's the broad kind of global design principles of tariffs. And then if we get on to, well, what is our specific policy? We are guided by, as municipal utilities, we're guided by predominantly by two sets of regulation. The one is the electricity pricing policy, and the other one is the Municipal Systems Act. The electricity pricing policy, I have to say an apology here. The draft is supposedly came out for review at the end of last week, and I've not been able to get a hold of a copy. So I'm going to speak largely off the old policy, but a little bit off what we've seen in the media from the minister's briefing. And then the Municipal Systems Act. So in terms of the electricity pricing policy, I think the most important thing is to emphasize that, again, going back to the Constitution, electricity is a trading services. And what that means is that it is expected to recover the costs that it incurs. They need to be efficiently incurred, but it's not meant to be bailed out constantly by the state. So people should pay for what they use. It's seen as an economic product in that sense. That is then counterbalanced by the notion of basic service provision. So at the same time, both of these policies say that municipalities must prioritize basic services and that the indigent customers must be included and they should not be charged fixed costs. and that these may be received through cross-subsidy. So the electricity pricing policy makes provision for a free basic provision of electricity, and we've seen that that has increased in the draft review that's out for public comment. And what I understand, or my understanding of the Department of Energy, what they're doing there is they're recognizing that the current tariffs are unaffordable for many, that people's electricity consumption is higher than anticipated as people have become fully electrified, as households have become fully electrified, and that greater provision is there to ensure that customers are not forced into um, illegal or informal connections on the side, so that we municipalities do get the full cost that those customers need in order to be. So it's an attempt to close that sort of revenue affordability gap. And then we're going to need to see what they say specifically about fixed costs. I think we all know that charging a fixed cost on a lifeline customer is just untenable. So many households amongst the poorer households in South Africa, if they receive any income at all, it'll be often on a weekly basis. And if you receive weekly amounts of money, it's very hard to pay an upfront monthly fixed cost. So the challenging question there would be, well, are all of those fixed costs paid for by cross subsidy from other customers, or do those customers pay some of the fixed costs, but you put that into the variable charge, so you charge it on a cents per kilowatt hour basis? And that's one of the key questions, and how do we do that? So that's important to remember. And I think the tariff, I mean, the subsidy policy has always said this, or the EPP has always said this, but I think people are going to be much stricter now, that these policies that are layered on top of the cost reflective tariff settings need to be a lot more transparent. Then lastly, an area that confuses a lot of people is the area of what is a municipal surcharge. So in terms of the Municipal Systems Act, municipalities may add a surcharge onto their electricity tariffs. This is not part of the regulated tariff, and this is not part of what NERSA even looks at. This falls under the jurisdiction of National Treasury. So in a sense, it is a tax that the city is allowed to charge. It's not the same as the surplus or the margin or the rate of return, which is part of your regulated tariff. So every municipal utility is allowed to get a margin to grow its business and to modernize its business. A surcharge is completely different. It's a tax levied on the tariff. Very few municipalities in South Africa still do this or use this tax. One example is that the city of Cape Town charges its public lighting as a surcharge on top of its electricity tariff. I'm noting that, by the way, because many municipalities in the room still include electricity in the tariff, not as a surcharge, which is technically not correct. So I'm actually going to raise that one as an important little note for people to start flagging. Okay, so why? So one of the things that this latest policy has done is that it's really emphasized this idea of cost reflectivity. It's been around all the time. I mean, it's not new, but it hasn't been such a big deal, and it's really picked up in the latest policy. So why is this? And I want to just specifically speak to the background to it and why it matters for us to do this. Because on the one hand, there's still people saying, well, why don't we, this is a public, electricity is owned by public utilities. Why must we pay cost reflective tariffs? Well, this really is the answer. So way back, this graph comes from the city of Cape Town, and I think it's very old. I think it's as old as about 2012 or so, or even earlier than that. And what this is tracking, the blue line shows what the city of Cape Town anticipated as the growth of electricity. And then the dotted green line and the black line showed what happened to demand from about, you can see it's about 2007. And I think many of you experienced this, that electricity people assumed would just grow and grow and grow as the economy grows or as people and households grow. And in 2007, 2008, when electricity prices shot up, we found that in fact the demand was highly price responsive, and there was this immediate flattening of the curve, which startled people, and then it actually went into decline, which was astonishing. This was happening while the economy was still growing and while population and households were still growing. It was really helped by obviously the electricity price, the fact that we were already quite inefficient, but we also had, of course, the lighting revolution and the introduction of quite stringent new building energy efficiency policies. But demand suddenly fell off. So anybody, people who were selling all the fixed costs through variable charges, suddenly the picture looked very different. And then we got, of course, the influx of behind the meter embedded generation, and everyone's very familiar with the classic duck curve. Globally, the price of renewables just fell and fell and fell, and it reached grid parity. So we saw that rapid uptake of renewables. In this country, it was driven by a combination of price, but also reliability because of load shedding. So suddenly it was no longer sensible to include all your fixed costs in your variable cost. Otherwise, you were losing a margin. So I think it's become very, very clear in South Africa that we must recover the full cost, except where it's explicitly subsidized. And we must better reflect the cost drivers. So if it's a fixed cost, we must recover it through a fixed charge. And over time, increasingly, time of use becomes important, which you see with that duck curve. And then, of course, flexibility as we move from a system of sort of 24/7 fossil fuels to a much more variable system of renewable energy. We have to price energy according to the time that it is brought on, and we're going to be paying more and more for capacity rather than straight energy. So energy, in fact, becomes a much lower cost, but we have to pay for capacity, which is a fixed cost. I'm not going to go into that in detail. It's a huge debate in the country at the moment in terms of the wholesale price. Okay, and so we're seeing that this is one you should all be familiar with. It's from the model itself. On the left-hand side, we have a typical example of a tariff in a municipality. We have introduced fixed customer charges to most of our tariff categories. We have included demand charges in most of our tariff categories, except for residential. But if we look on the right-hand side, we will see that we haven't included nearly enough of the demand charges that are really in the system, and that is only going to increase as we get to the market system, where more and more of the charges, the fixed charges, are going to be much larger. We're going to be paying a lot for capacity, and we're going to see energy charges, so that's the blue charge, probably go down to around 40% of the total electricity price. And I always think of this as butterfly wings. The reason we call it revenue recovery, the reason cost reflectivity, if you charge your tariff correctly, you will raise the revenue that you anticipate. If your tariff doesn't match how the costs are driven, then the money you raise from your customers may fall short of what you need. So this is why you want your butterfly wings to look symmetrical as much as possible. But as I've said, that is the basis. But then we've got to go and engage customers, and we've got to then take the science and we've got to start massaging it to make it acceptable to customers. So some of you might recall, we had a session on stakeholder engagement, and Chris Gower from Buffalo City Municipality spoke us through their customer engagement, and off the back of the work that they've done, we developed a stakeholder guide on a guide on how to engage your stakeholders. And really that speaks to, I think what came strongly through from Chris, and it's what Nick is going to pick up through the day, is that customers do not engage, apart from maybe 4 engineers in your city. Customers are not going to engage your cost of supply model. What they are going to engage, and this is human nature around the world, is how does this affect me? So one of the things you need to do is to be able to show them, how does this affect you? They need to be able to test it and understand it. And, this is really key. I mean, often we will hear from low income customers or sort of lobbyists, well, it's unfair because look, the domestic or the lifeline customer, the energy charges R2.40, but industrial customers are only charged R1.70. And what they're not understanding is those industrial customers are being charged R1.70 for energy. They're also being charged a KVA rate and a fixed customer rate, and they may also be on time of use. So people really will only understand how that plays out if they can play around with a tool, or if you can demonstrate through graphs how the KVA rate plays out for an industrial customer and so on. So you need to do the homework. You need to be able to explain exactly to a customer what they're paying for. They need to be able to be seeing how it plays out for them, how it plays out for the other customers. And you need to have these questions already, these kind of frequently asked questions already pre-developed so that when you engage your customers, you can respond to them rather than going with a complicated cost of supply model and expecting them to feel okay about that. That's going to probably just provoke more and more anger. So in wrapping up, what I would see as the key takeaway as you go into this morning session with Nick, but also as we go into this next round of tariff development, and thinking about what the new electricity pricing policy is going to be bringing into the picture. And maybe just to say that Candace took us on our futuristic flight last week, and what we sort of saw in the future is going to be a very unbundled system, and a lot of people interacting with the market. So when we talk about cost reflective, what we're really also talking about is starting to unbundle the services and starting to develop an understanding of the different services, and that customers will pay for different services and may not pay for all services. They may not buy all services from you as the utility. They may be buying it elsewhere. So some of the things to take away. I think on a high level, and I think this may come through in the policy, we need to move to more standardized tariffs. So the deforms are a great start. But at the moment, in a way, they create a bit of confusion because on the one hand, you've got your tariff books which don't match the deforms and how you report on your tariffs. So we need to bring those more in line. So we greatly encourage that. We need to we need to design the tariffs to balance all 5 objectives. So while I think as utility staff, your hearts kind of fall to your boots when you know how much revenue you need and you take it to your political heads and they say, sorry, back to the drawing board, or you take it to the regulator and the regulator says, I'm sorry, this is unacceptable in terms of customer impact. You can't have that sort of an increase. And I think that what they're doing is that they're saying, look, while we know that you need this for revenue requirement, you need it for your economic efficiency, they're balancing it with equity, fairness, and so on. So you need to accept some of that, and there are ways to mitigate it. So I'll talk about that as I go down the line. So what I'm really saying is that cost of supply methodology makes the kind of underlying science of your tariffs defensible, and you need to make sure it is doing that. So I think that's something the regulator and your stakeholder, your customer stakeholders are looking at. They're seeing, oh, you're doing cost of supply, but we're not seeing it in the resulting tariffs. The tariffs are really just the same as last time. So you need to start doing a kind of what we might call a tariff transition pathway, where customers and the regulator can see, okay, this is how you're moving across from current tariffs to more cost reflective tariffs. And then we need to be much more explicit about the political choices, and we need to layer these on top. So if you are cross subsidizing, we need to start making that much more transparent, and we need to make it supported by a policy document. So I think that's really important. We can't be caught on the back foot here. We can in the transition. So again, I would strongly encourage people to say, if you are heavily cross-subsidizing of one customer group at the moment, you need to say to that customer group, we're heavily over subsidizing through you, but we're going to slowly, we can't do it overnight. We're going to slowly transition away from that. So I think look at that. I think it's really important. Otherwise, you're going to end up in court. And I think nobody wants to be in court and having the courts make these decisions for us, because we do know better than the courts. Which covers that publish your subsidies and surcharges transparently. These need to be policy based. I've covered that one. And then lastly, this thing about stakeholders. So this is quite new for all of us. This kind of publishing your cost of supply studies, publishing all of those costs. We're being thrust from a system where we did cross-subsidize heavily, and as I continuously say, that was supported by policy. But what we didn't do was make it transparent, and we didn't really always make it a very clear political choice, and we need to start doing that. So we need to get our houses in order there. We need to develop information that customers can understand. I think that's critical. And this is not just in South Africa, but really all around the world. You know, I was Googling sort of where is there good customer communication on tariffs. It's a big issue in the UK, in Australia, in America, absolutely everywhere. Nobody understands tariffs. People always feel grumpy about them. And quite frankly, when I looked at the materials out there, there's really not good stuff. So I think we can pioneer here. I think we should. And in that, I'm going to say that this understanding the impact on them is really critical. And I think a tariff pathway. People need to understand where they're going. I interestingly looked up eThekwini's tariffs the other day for some reason, and you know, what I found really interesting was that they published not just this year's tariffs, but next year's tariffs as well. And I thought, that's fantastic. That's like gives a customer a sense of this is where I'm going. You know, that this might be the percentage increase this year, but next year it's going to be this. And I think that's something that our new electricity pricing policy and our minister is calling for. They're going to set it up nationally, a kind of 10-year pricing pathway. And I think locally we can look at how we do that. So customers, you know, I think customers don't mind so much if they know where they're headed, then they can make choices about investments, about their businesses, about what they can do. And that's really, we're going to look a lot this morning at how do you build up those tariffs and how do you test their impact on customers. Thank you. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Megan. I think you did a good job of laying the groundwork, and we're going to build on that now and get into a little bit of how tariff design in the tool works. Before I get going on that, I will acknowledge that not everybody in this call necessarily uses this cost of supply tool that we work with. And while that's okay, it's the same concept applies. So the tariff design concept applies no matter how or where you design your tariffs. But we'll be using this cost of supply tool that most of you will be familiar with. So if you aren't used to working with it, you can still follow along, but I think the principles apply anyway. So when it comes to tariff design, you actually have to start the step before and looking at your cost of supply results and analyze those. So many of you will be familiar with this. I've used it a few times, but this is the cost of supply process. And seems my animations, there we go. And after you've put in your data, you've now figured out the revenue requirement, so the amount of revenue you need to be cost reflective to cover all your costs. You then You then go to your cost classification and cost allocation steps. That's where the costs are sliced and diced amongst customer categories, your whys and your retail business. And then your cost results are spat out. And these, my mouse is not, there we go. And these results show you where your costs are in terms of the energy-driven costs, the demand-driven costs, the customer-driven costs, how much of it sits in the wire side of the business, the network infrastructure side, or the retail side of the business, and how different seasons and times of use affect your costs. Once you know that, you're then equipped with the information you need to design your tariffs. And that's the important part. You don't want to go in blind and just design tariffs willy-nilly. I think if you've seen how that goes before, it never goes well. So in the cost of supply tool, there's a tab called the cost of supply results. And there are lots of tables like this, and it can maybe feel a bit overwhelming at first. But when you slow down and you read the different headings and everything, you can see the cost of supply results, and they'll be split up according to the energy, demand, customer-driven costs. In this example, you can see how it shows you according to their unit of measurement. So in this random example, it's 3 Rand 50 to supply energy to that customer category. It costs about 504 Rand per kVA per month to service them, and about 17 Rand per month on a customer-related charge. That's also then aggregated into a cents per kilowatt hour view, and you can see how it's about 2 Rand, 1 Rand 99 per kilowatt hour to service the demand side, and actually only 8 cents per kilowatt hour in terms of a fixed charge. So these are very interesting results to go through, and they inform where your tariff decisions should come from. There are plenty of other useful little tables on the cost of supply results tab that I encourage you to look at, and you'll be able to see those in the demo tool that I've sent out. But for an example, you can see these are some of the ways you can look at your results. And basically what it shows you is what it actually costs to serve each customer group. Because I think at the end of the day, you will know intuitively that different customers behave in different ways, and the way they consume electricity affects how much you have to spend to keep the lights on. So you can see over here, these greeny blue bars, they show you how much it costs. And then when you see how much you're currently recovering for each customer category, you can see that in some cases you way under recovering, and in other cases you way over recovering. And this is part of that cross subsidization framework that Megan was referring to. You aren't supposed to necessarily have these gray bars exactly in line with the greeny blue bars. You're allowed to cross subsidize, but you need to be aware of the fact that maybe my costs are really high in certain categories, and look at ways to address that. So now once you've looked at your results, you can go into the tariff design itself. So if you've worked with our tool before, you'll be very familiar with this rate design dashboard. This is where you can see all of your results aggregated in a way that makes your tariff design a bit easier. The full results are on the results sheet, but you can then also design different elements of your tariff design. So it basically, if you were to summarize the sheet in a sentence, it compares your business as usual revenue, so the rates that you currently charge your customers, against your cost to serve results for year 2. So when we talk about year 2, we're designing tariffs for next year. So we'll be in year 1, and year 0 is the base data that we used in the data inputs. So we're designing tariffs for next year, and according to the model, we need to increase our tariffs by, you can see it says 29%. Don't worry if you can't see that clearly now. We'll have a more zoomed in version in a bit. So basically, the tools in your or at your disposal are your costs and your business as usual revenue. The increase that you need to be cost reflective, that's just an indication. It's not saying you have to reach cost reflectivity per customer category, but it shows you where you are under recovering. It shows you by customer category where you would be under recovering and where you'd be over recovering. So these blue bars here, these are customer categories where they are being undercharged, and these red ones are where they're being overcharged. This is the policy question of cross subsidy. So this is completely allowed. However, if you don't have a policy outlining why it's happening, you might find that certain parts of your constituency are unhappy that they feel like they're being overcharged. You then can also change your tariff increase or decrease if you wanted to. It's unlikely, but you can increase your tariffs. You can also then change the rate structure. So you could go from, say, a flat energy rate to including a demand charge and a customer related charge. And you can also design time of use and seasonal tariffs. So it's a one-stop shop for tariff design. So zooming in a bit more, you can see this is the top of the sheet, and this is the big picture. So you can see they make about 300 million in terms of their business as usual revenue, but the costs to supply is more like 500 million. So there's a deficit here. And what that basically means is they need to, if they wanted to be cost reflective tomorrow, their tariffs would have to increase by 29.9%. Or put another way, they are only recovering 77% of their costs at the moment. So now, once you know that, this will always be in the back of your mind as you go through the tariff design process. And you'll also know that you are unlikely to get a 29% increase approved by NERSA. So you might have to think about phasing it in over time, but you can also think about different ways of recovering that revenue rather than through just a cents per kilowatt hour rate, especially if your electricity demand is decreasing. So then if you were to go down a bit more to these graphs here that I spoke about, these two here show you your current cross subsidies where you under and over recover. And then as you go and design your new rates, you'll see those new rates represented here in this kind of light blue graph. So you'll be able to see I was previously overcharging by about 26% for the manufacturing and industrial customers, and I've now increased their tariffs. So now I'll be over recovering by 50%. You'll be able to see that in this graph. These graphs here on the right, they visually show you, firstly, how much you need to be cost reflective and what you currently make in revenue. And then your new rates over here will show you, if you've designed all your rates, where will you end up in relation to the cost reflective graph. This one down here is an interesting one. This shows you that your breakdown in costs and your existing tariffs. In this example here, you can see the blue is the energy related charges. And then this brown color is demand and the green is a customer related cost. So you can see that most of the tariffs here are energy related charges, so cents per kilowatt hour. There's not a lot of rand per kVA or rand per customer. Based on the study, it suggests that there needs to be much more emphasis on demand related charges. So you can see that the energy portion is lower than what we're currently charging. So that might help you decide on how you design your cost structure. So once you've looked at all of that, now you can start designing your tariffs. And this average rate inputs table here allows you to choose, firstly, for every customer category, do you want to do a percentage increase or use a total average rate? So you could say, we used to charge 300 cents per kilowatt hour. Now we want to charge 305 cents. That's one way to do it. However, usually we just say use the percentage increase. So you would say increase it by 5% or 10%, and you type that in over here. Very important. And if you've ever been to our trainings before, only edit the yellow cells. If you start typing in this gray and black area, you might end up breaking a few things, and it won't come out neatly at the end. So once you've decided that, let's say in this example that we're going to increase our tariffs by 10%, what that 10% applies to is your existing rates. So if you only charge an energy charge, then it's only going to increase your energy charge by 10%. If you want to transition over to a different rate structure where it's a mixture of energy charges and demand charges and fixed charges, then you come down to the rate structure inputs. And what you do is you decide according to your preferences, or if you wanted to just go with the purely cost reflective route, how much you want to split your charges across the three different cost drivers. So you can see these green columns here, they show you what you currently charge. So let's say for manufacturing and industrial, 80% of the charges to the manufacturing and industrial customers in this municipality are energy charges. Then 18% are demand charges and 2% are fixed charges. If you wanted to change that, you could look at the cost reflective structure. So the results of the study suggest that actually 84% of the costs come from cents per kilowatt energy charges. So you could then type in 84% there if you wanted. Then it says it's actually 14% instead of 18% for your demand charges. So you could type 14% in there. And then what you'll notice is that this will automatically go to 1%, which is what it states over here. So you can see in this municipality, their rate design for their manufacturing and industrial customers actually wasn't too far off. So you can play around with this and figure out what works best for you. And this will tie into the tariff impact analysis that we'll get to later. So you might find, okay, we like this rate structure that we've developed. Let's go and see how it affects the customers. And then you see that maybe their bill has doubled because of the rate structure that you've designed. And you know that that won't be very palatable for them. So then you can come back here and redesign it until you've reached the happy medium. Once you've designed the rate structure, you can also design time of use and seasonal charges. And I just wanted to mention at this point that the tool that I've sent out in the example is the existing cost of supply tool, but the developers of the tool are actually they're doing a new version, and it should be out fairly soon. So there might be some changes in this section, they've told me, but they'll be quite small and the concept will stay the same. So once the new tool becomes available, we'll make sure to share any changes with you. So when you get down to the tariff time of use design inputs, you'll see the first table here allows you to choose if you want to have time of use energy rates. If you want that, then you'd click on true. If you want to leave it as just the same rates throughout the day, you'd leave it as false. If you want to implement seasonal energy rates, it's the same thing. You can pick true, or you can leave it as false. And the same with demand. So you could have a high season demand rate that is different to your low season. Once you've done that, let's say you've picked true for your time of use energy rate, you can then come over here to this second table, and this is where you would make your different pricing signals. So your peak pricing signal, this is what you would be charging at peak time. And this would be according to the Eskom time of use breakdown. So let's say 7 a.m. on a weekday, that would be considered peak time. Standard time would be maybe 12 p.m. in the week, and then off peak would be something like 3 a.m. Based on the cost of supply study, you can see that the study has calculated that the peak pricing signal should be 176% in peak time. So that means you're charging much more than you would under normal circumstances, much more than you're currently doing at the moment. So you could put that in there, or you could decide on your own pricing signal. And the same with standard time, it says actually you might be slightly overcharging customers in standard time. So you could actually reduce the tariff for the middle of the day, and you could reduce it at off-peak by about half. So you would stack your costs more to peak time for this customer category if you wanted to do it fully cost reflectively. So you can see your business as usual rates show the existing structure. And as I said, the blue columns show your cost reflective structure. Again, it's important to stress, you don't have to be fully cost reflective. This is not prescriptive. You don't have to put that in. It just gives you an indication of where the costs lie. So I think that is quite it's quite a lot to digest, especially with just me talking. So what we're going to do a little bit later after the comfort break is we're going to go through this in the tool itself, so in that demo tool. And I think that that's a nice way for everyone to get to grips with it, and it's a bit more interactive. So what I suggest is that we come back at 10:15. And if you haven't received the demo tool that I sent out, please could you drop your email address into the chat, and I'll make sure to send it out to you. And then once we've got that out to everybody, we'll pick up again with a bit of the rate impact and then the exercise itself. So yeah, we'll see everyone again at 10:15.
Nick, so
Yes.
there is a question. What we forgot to say to people is to put any questions in the Q&A. So it's going to be quite difficult for us to open it up to general questions. But I see there's one. Let me just see who that is. Donovan Plagies. Should we take one question, Donovan, or can you write it into the Q&A? Let's just take it as a question. There are not tons of hands up, so.
Oh yeah,
Nick, are you
I
able
can
to let
take a
Donovan?
question.
Okay.
Yes.
Donovan, yeah, okay, there you go.
Thank you, colleagues. It's not a question, but it seems that I can't type in the chat, so I can't say anything.
Good thing we unmuted you and let you speak.
Yeah.
And Donovan, even in the Q&A, so can you see at the top of the call on the Teams thing, there's a Q&A, and maybe you'll be able to type into there?
Oh, where's that exactly?
On
if I
my
share
thing,
my screen,
yeah, it's
I'll show
between
you.
people and chat.
So hold on. It's gone back to my PowerPoint. Hold on a second.
And while you're doing that, just thanks to everyone who's putting their names in Munich. It's really helpful for us just to, and I think particularly for the regulator to know exactly who's in the room, and who's in attendance. Really appreciate it.
So if you look up top here,
Yeah.
you can see there's the chat, and then next to it is the Q&A.
So why do
And
I not have those?
I wonder. It's a very good
I
question.
would have that.
Donovan, we'll give you a
Yes.
special dispensation to open. We'll let you speak into the space if you have any particular questions. Otherwise, Nick is nick@sustainable.org.za, and you can always just
Okay, yeah.
email.
Okay, I have Nick's email
directly.
address, so I'll just send
You've got
send
it.
Nick an email. Okay, thank you, Megan.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you, colleagues.
Yeah, back to you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks. So I think we'll have a quick break, and maybe let's make it 10:20 since now I've taken up a bit of time. So if everyone could come back at 10:20, I'll try and share the share the tool with everyone, and then we'll go from there. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you have a nice cup of tea or coffee, and you'll see there's a big QR code on the screen. That's for our Kahoot. We're going to do a little game show quiz for everyone just to wake you all up and then get everyone ready for some tariff design. So you can scan this with your phone, or you can go on your computer to the website, that www.kahoot.it, and then you type in the game pin. If you are on your phone, don't let your phone screen lock. I think it then kicks you out and you have to re-sign in. So just keep your screen on. You can see we're getting lots of people registering. I always like playing this Kahoot. It gets my competitive juices flowing a little bit. You'll be able to see how well you've been paying attention so far. But yeah, it looks like we're getting a lot of people signing up, which is good. We'll give it a few more minutes.
Looking fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
How many?
I'm hearing the music.
We can't really see, but
no, but it looks like a lot. Yeah. I hope that I've tried my best to get the music to work for you at home, because the music adds to the suspense of it all.
No, it's working. It's working, Nick.
That's great.
Just got my cup of coffee.
Nice. We've got a lot of people, hey? All right. I'm going to give it, because I know...
I think it's because people are quite familiar with our Kahoot.
Yeah, this is good.
Log in quickly.
Okay, I'll give everyone 1 more minute, and then we can get started. Yeah. Just for those that are...
Shady.
Yeah, you can't beat a good old Kahoot. All right, Snoop. It's got some crumpets during the break. All right. Okay, I think I'm thinking it's time to get going. All right. So, okay, everybody, fingers ready. We're gonna get started. All right. So, what is the NERSA-approved method of determining tariffs? Pick the right answer. Everyone's quick, yeah? Think carefully though, you don't want to accidentally click the wrong one. Okay, we've got 5 seconds left. Okay, wow, so people are paying attention.
That's such a relief. One is tempted to phone a friend. I've seen that in the cost of supply study workshops.
Yeah. I was going to go with the yellow one, but I'm glad that everyone else went with the green one here. Okay, so just to show you, you get rewarded for how quickly you answer as well. So although everyone got it right, Sia was the fastest, so well done. Let's see if anyone can knock Sia off his top spot there.
I know Mims is a regular winner of this, so let's see.
Yeah. Okay, what color cells do you edit in the cost of supply tool? This is a bit more tricky. Some people are thinking. 29 answers. We've got 5 seconds to go. Oh, it was a bit of a trick question because you only edit the yellow cells. So that's an important one. But I made the yellow in the blue box. Yeah. But it's a good lesson. Only edit the yellow cells, because if you edit other color cells, then your cost of supply study will be broken, and then everyone's going to have a headache trying to fix it. So remember that. Okay, let's see. Sia, he's opened up a bit more of a gap here. And Sibu is the highest climber, up 18 places. So well done. You were quick on the trigger there. Okay, next one. True or false? Policy states that you must charge a Lifeline customer a fixed charge. Is that true or is it false? Think about it. Don't rush. Okay. This is promising to see. Most people got the right answer. Megan, do you want to elaborate a little bit for everyone at home?
No, I'm really just pleased that most people do understand that that's you really can't expect poor households to pay a fixed charge upfront. Yeah, really, most people earn on a kind of a weekly basis. So think about that. It just wouldn't work.
Yes.
So the 5
okay.
that said true, yeah, it's really important that they're not charged a fixed charge. I mean, I think just to obviously, sorry, to counter this, and then maybe the ones who said true are going to now demand a point, but I do think that you might want to charge a slight, maybe the customer costs or something as a fixed charge, but even there, I wouldn't do it. I would do everything as a cents per kilowatt hour basis. Yeah. That would be the general direction. But people will, as we said, this is an art and not a science. So people will have slightly other opinions of what they do in their municipality, and it would be wonderful to have a discussion. But we're going with the false here, guys. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that the tool allows you to see these costs built in a cents per kilowatt hour style. So
yeah.
you can work with that. Okay. Yeah. So next one. Wow, Sia is definitely he's taking a break from the Springbok training camp this week to join us on the Kahoot, and he's opened up a big lead here. Okay,
and Mims
so
is
next
back,
one, yeah. Okay, this is a puzzle, so you move them into the correct order. So what is the cost of design? I mean, the cost of supply process. So you drag these into the right order. So I've given you a bit more time. You've got a minute.
Nick,
so what step comes first?
First at the top.
Yes, you put the first
so we go from the top down.
Yeah. So what goes first in the cost of supply process? And what goes last? Do you submit to NERSA first and then design your tariffs afterwards? I know some municipalities do that.
It's an approach if you're going the courts route.
Yeah. I didn't add the court case step into the process here because it's not technically part of the process. Okay, 5 seconds to go. Lock them in. Okay, wow. So we actually had a lot of people get that right. I think the ones that maybe didn't get it right, they might have run out of time. But as you would have seen in that little flow chart from earlier on, you put data in first. Using the data, you work out your revenue requirements. Once you've figured out how much revenue you need to earn, you design your tariffs accordingly. And only then, once you've done that, will you submit this to NERSA. So, and we'll touch on this a little bit later as well. The deadline's coming up in the next round of tariff design and submission. But if you put tariff design after your NERSA submission, then it's go straight to jail in monopoly terms. You'll slide down to a court case. So remember, everything needs to work in this order. Okay, let's see. Oh, what happened to Sia there? So Mims must have been quick. Nice. And Mdimlo has got 4 right in a row. So obviously it's doing quite well there. Okay, next one. True or false? A surcharge is the same as a surplus. Is that true? Remember, Megan mentioned it earlier. 5 seconds left. I think everyone's locking their answers in here. Okay, nice. Seems like everyone got that one pretty much. Yeah, so as Megan was saying...
For the two who didn't, a surcharge is a tax, and a surplus essentially kind of mimics kind of return on your investment.
Yes, exactly. So well done. Let's see who's jumped up the leaderboard. Okay, wow. We're starting to establish our top 5 here.
Pair at the top, hey? Yeah, top 5. Tim Blue is on the charts.
Yeah, he's done very well there. Or she. Okay, next question. This is a multi-select, so there's more than one right answer. In cost of supply, what should municipalities do? What are the things you must do? Should you create a cross-subsidy framework? Should you balance cost reflectivity and fairness in your tariff design? Should you just give up hope? And should you submit a cost of supply study?
A couple of tempting ones there.
Yeah. I like this song that's playing in the background. Think long and hard about this one. There are 3 answers that you must select. That's a nice clue. All right. Okay. So, well done. Seems not everybody selected that you should create a cross-subsidy framework, but it's definitely something that we encourage and that you'll find as more and more people scrutinize cost of supply studies and during tariff engagements with your customers, they'll be asking, why must I pay more than it costs me? And the reason why is because of your cross-subsidy framework. So if you have that, then you can refer them to that and it will make this process a lot easier for you. If you can't say why you're overcharging them, you might not be able to in the future. So it's good to get that in place, something we recommend.
Nick,
I also seen, yeah,
I just want to add it to that I mean, I think what it does raise, which is valid, is, it may not be the people who do the cost of supply study. It may not be their responsibility to generate that cross-subsidy framework or policy. So I think that is an interesting reflection that's come out of this, which is whose job is that, and how do you do it? So the cost of supply study would be an input into that process, but they might not be the people who do it. So that's something just for you guys all to think about. Yes.
I think that's a fair point. Also, good to see that no one said that you must give up hope. But that's good answering on that. Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm not sure who CA is, but I was rooting for them because they were winning, and now they're dropping down. So well done to Mims, is opening up a bit of a gap there. And Fundo's climbed up the ranks. So now we don't have too many questions left, so you're going to have to cement your spots in now. Okay, this is another multi-select. What are the main cost drivers in the electricity distribution business? Is it energy costs, lost costs, demand costs, or customer costs? Think about the general rule, not your municipality specifically. 5 seconds. Okay, so some people think lost costs are cost drivers, and in a roundabout way they might be, but officially speaking, energy, demand, and customer related costs are your main cost drivers. That's how we split it up, and that's a point we like to really drive home to everyone, that it isn't just energy in kilowatt hours. There are other costs, and those are the demand costs driven by the rate of energy consumption, and then the customer related costs, which are fixed. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just interested, Nick, coming in there, that energy cost has got the highest vote. And it's almost like it shows that we're still somewhat stuck in a mindset of thinking that energy drives our electricity value chain. And in actual fact, more and more, as we unbundle costs, we're seeing that it's not energy per se, but capacity and fixed system costs that are bigger drivers, actually. So interesting little glimpse there into we've got to start thinking of energy as being really a smaller, much smaller part of the picture.
Yes, yes, I agree. Let's see who did well here. Mfundo is really coming in at the end.
Sneaking in
Mfundo's
from
got
behind there, Mfundo.
Yeah, you know, in athletics, they say that it's got a good kick, kicking at the time when it matters. Okay, this is now the last question. Let's see who's going to come away with the win. When is the NERSA cost of supply submission deadline in 2027? So next year. Is it 20 March next year? Is it the 31st of December this year? Is it the 31st of February next year? Or is it the 1st of April, 2022?
That's a great question.
Let's see. This is a very important one. Maybe the most important one. Okay, wow. So we've got a bit of a spread here. So the correct answer, which most of you got, is the 20th of March next year. So if you didn't know, now you do. It's not New Year's Eve, so you can relax on New Year's Eve. You can stay up with your friends and family. February only has I don't know if it's a leap year or not, but February doesn't have 31 days, as you will be well aware now. And April Fool's Day, it could have been, but that was a few years ago. So only if you're redoing your tariff submission for 2023, would you maybe think about that 2022 submission? Okay, so let's see the podium. All right, number 3, bye, well done. Mims, oh, someone just pipped you at the end there, and number 1 is Mfundo, yo, the kicker.
Woo!
Well done. And Sia crept back into the top 5. Well done, everybody. That's brilliant. So I should probably close this, otherwise it's going to keep playing the music. I can still hear the music ringing in my ears. So well done, everyone. And I think too many trick questions, says Chris Carr. I'm sorry. I had to make sure people were on their toes. But
remembering that, yeah, that's often the best way to learn, right? Making the mistake.
Correct. So now I just want to check if Sia Temba is on the call. Are you there? I can't. He is there.
Yes, he is. Yeah,
Sia.
yeah.
Brilliant. You're welcome to share and to start speaking. I think you can unmute yourself whenever you want.
Maybe as we bring Sia in, Nick, just to say what we really were looking for was just, you know, every single municipality in the room here has their own particular experience with how to take the costs and put them into tariffs. And we just wanted to get one sort of reflection from a municipality around what are some of the things they have managed to do, what are the things they're struggling with, what have they learnt the hard way, and we invited Sia in to do that. So great appreciation, Sia. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sia, before I introduce you, I just wanted to check, are you able to unmute yourself and to speak and everything?
Morning, colleagues. Morning, Nick. Morning, Megan. Am I audible?
You are indeed. Thank you. So yes, as Megan was saying, everyone, this is Sia Temba Lutuli from eThekwini. He's got got a lot of experience in all of the different sides of the cost of supply process and tariff design, and we're looking forward to hearing some of his insights. So it's not just us talking to you, but you can also hear from a municipality what they've gone through and some of the innovations that they've used. So the floor is yours.
All right. Again, morning, colleagues. Name is Yatemba Lutuli. I work at the eThekwini municipality and the Electricity and Energy Directorate. So today, I'd just like to take you through our journey. I think it'll be best pertinent to focus on our most recent submission and the lessons learned and basically our experiences thereof. So in a nutshell, when you look at our municipality, this is how our revenue is basically traditionally contributed, where 40% comes from industrial customers, 27% from the residential customers, 26% from our business in general, and just only 7% from our prepaid customers. Now, while we were conducting our cost of supply study, one of the results that came through was when you look at our business as usual, almost 94% came from energy. Demand costs made up around about 6%, and just 1% of our revenue came through from customer-related costs. And this was our business as usual, showing a very high vulnerability to variation and variable costs. And when we were done with the cost of supply study, basically the results show that the graph on the right is where we wanted to be, or where we needed to be, where we decreased our Hello, am I still audible?
You dropped off for a second, but we can hear you again now.
Okay, all right. So we're basically we are able to decrease our reliance on the variable costs and increase our stability of our income in terms of increasing the revenue from the demand costs and from the demand charges as well as the customer related charges. Now, from a revenue recovery point of view, when you talk about cost reflectivity, you'll note that a lot of my slides are very similar to the slides that Megan presented in the first presentation. So I found myself asking, what am I going to present if she presents everything that I present? But when you look at our case, where the industrial customers or our industrial sector is relatively more or less on the cost reflectivity line, barring the commercial time of use, where it's only 38% over recovering. But you will note that on our residential side, especially on our prepaid side, we are under recovering heavily on the side, as well as, but if you look on the flip side of the coin, you'd find that we are over recovering on our business and on our business sector. So we needed to find a way to bring our residential sector closer to the cost reflectivity line, and as well as our business sector as well, because if you would take this picture and present it to the layman on the street, they would cry blue murder. So based on our cost of supply, we set out future aspirations where in our residential tariffs, we wanted to introduce seasonality and fixed charges, where the fixed charges will be linked to property rates, and with the aim of reaching cost effectivity in 10 years, because we understood that it would take time to basically correct this under recovery as well as this over recovery without shocking the system. On our RTU tariff, we said that we would want to optimize it a tad bit further just by increasing the fixed cost components, as well as on the BNG tariff, which is the scale 1, with introduction of seasonality and the increased fixed charge and fixed charge and reach cost reflectivity within 10 years. The Scale 2 tariff was found to be non-cost reflective, as can be seen with the 91% over recovery, as well as the LV3 scale as well. So these were deemed to now be obsolete, and then we would then launch a program to migrate these customers to more cost-effective, suitable tariffs. I'm happy to report that as of the 1st of July, both of these two, all of the customers have been migrated onto more suitable tariffs in both the Scale 2 and the LV3 part. So part 1 of the future aspiration is complete. Now, when we took a look at our tariffs and we decided, what does cost reflectivity look like? So if we were to take an example where we look at a more developed nation versus our tariffs on the left, are conventional tariff, 357, flat rate, easy to implement, customers are happy, customers are not confused. But true cost reflectivity you'd have up to 6 tariff components and very complex, and customers would be very confused. So we would then be sacrificing simplicity in search of cost reflectivity, but further increasing customer confusion, therefore requiring the need for further engagement with our customers to make sure that customer education, to ensure that there is minimal confusion within the customer base. Now, one of the results of our most recent cost of supply submission was that in order for us to bring the cost reflectivity amongst the residential sector, our Scale 3 would have to be increased by 8%. Our Scale 4 would have to be increased by 22.9%, 8 by 120%, Scale 9 242%, Scale 10 by 196%, and Scale 11 by around 466%. This is if we were to, as Nick pointed out earlier, if we were to individually make each of the tariffs cost reflective. But if we were then to use the average increase approach, where the average increase required to attain cost reflectivity was around 10.5%. So then, in terms of optimizing our tariffs, we had the choice of either optimizing our business tariffs first or our residential tariffs first. And we opted to optimize our business tariffs first because it's easier to tackle businesses than tackle residents, as businesses are less likely to burn tires. From the cost of supply study, the current splits between variable and fixed rates was 96% to 4%. And using the COS tool, we basically came up with 2 options, where the first option would be to increment the fixed charge and reduce the energy charge to basically get the desired ratio as per the COS output to 76%, 24% ratio between fixed and variable. Or the second option was to keep the fixed charge as is without an increment, and then introduce seasonality on the variable charge, which is the energy charge. In doing this, we had to dig deeper and look at the source of, or rather look at our customer base, where 51% of our customer base basically consumes below 1,000 kilowatt hours a month on average. 39%, only 39% consumes above 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, and 10% at this point in time is deemed as disconnected. And this is a sad reality in terms of eThekwini, and I think the greater country as a whole, in terms of the state of our business sector. Some businesses have gone out of business, or have just been in a dilapidated state where they are either disconnected legally or are now connected illegally and are continue to do business. And this is a cause for concern, and should be a cause for concern for all of us, because the way we design our tariffs has a direct impact on whether this 10% increases or decreases. Now, when we in interacting with the COS tool, we then decided to map what the customer impact would be across all of our customer categories. And what we found is that if we were to implement the desired split across the 10 years, a 10-year gap, this is the resulting impact, where the low consuming customers would, which is basically from 0 to 1,000, would experience increases of in excess of 50%. Then the customers consuming between 1,000 and 2,500 kilowatt hours per month on average would have an increase of around 15 to 20%. And from 2,500 and above, they'd have average increases around the 10 to 15% mark. This then begs the question is in that, as part of our tariff design, is it optimal to keep the current tariffs as they are, the tariff category as they are, or then would one of the decisions that need to be made to break up this tariff into 3 separate categories, where we'd have from zero customers drawing from 0 to 1,000 in one tariff category, from above 1,000 to 2,500 in another tariff category, and 2,500 beyond in another tariff category? Because if you were to treat all of these customers as one, the variance in the real impact felt by the customers would be severely unfair. In essence, we would have the low consuming customers subsidizing the high consuming customers, which is an unideal situation. Which then brings about this conundrum. Responsible municipalities must balance cost reflectivity and customer affordability. Now, when we talk about cost reflectivity, we talk about increasing financial stability in terms of stabilizing our revenues, as well as ensuring that we decrease our reliance on variable charges. But when you talk about affordability, you also touch on the customer's willingness to pay, as well as the political pressure that comes from the communities that we serve. In an ideal situation, the rational approach would be to launch a tariff framework and continuously monitor and amend the framework as the sector advances. So what then happened after our COS and we put in the plan together, the 10-year plan for the optimization of the business sector as well as the residential sector? So the initial cost of supply indicated a revenue requirement of 11.8% increase. After public consultation and very, very extensive meetings with our political powers that be, this was revised to a 10.5% revenue increase, as indicated in the earlier slides. Following a second round of consultations, the political principals further came back and said, listen, we understand that you've done all the studies and this is where we need to go. But unfortunately, since it's election year, this increase is unpalpable. So it was then revised further to a skin to bone 9%. That touches on our sustainability And as I said, the local government elections are this year, thus increasing the political pressure. And from that, we got our 26-27 electricity tariffs, which we then applied and to the regulator and got. On the bright side, we were able to make one step towards, which is a very big step towards our 10-year tariff plan, which was we were able to secure the implementation of seasonality on our business tariffs. What this now means is that next year we will have to re-evaluate the COS, the current operating climate of the tariffs in terms of our customer base, and then start the whole process again. Hopefully, we'll be able to get this picture more perfect next year, because at this point in time, it's very, very skewed. Yeah, and that's me for today. Thank you, Nick. Back to you.
Thank you, Sia. And that was very insightful. And I think everyone here can relate to the sort of pressures that you feel when it's not just implementing what you've figured out on paper. There's a lot of other factors that come into it. So we appreciate that it's not an easy job, and we take our hats off to you for everyone for getting it right. And I guess the lesson from, or one of the lessons from Sia, is that you just need to get a plan together and slowly start implementing things, and slowly but surely you will get it right. If you do have any questions for Sia, you can, and I'll actually just share my screen again. Let me just stop sharing this quickly. You can put it in the Q&A. So
Nick, I see Chris has put one. Nick has got,
yes.
Chris Gower has put one in the normal chat.
Yeah, I'll get to that now. So if you can put it in the chat. I think I'm sharing how you'll see it. If there's a question in the chat, or you can pop it in to the Q&A. You can see Kennedy asked a question and I answered it here. Then Sia might be able to answer some of those questions while we carry on with the presentation. But just wanted to say thanks again to Sia. It's also not easy to speak in front of everyone and kind of show where your municipality has had struggles, but I think it's nice to foster that sort of attitude of we're all in it together, and we want to work with each other and help each other as much as possible. So sharing between municipalities, we only compete when it's a cahoot, but when it comes to cost of supply, learnings and lessons, then it's nice to collaborate. Okay, so I'm going to now use our last hour here to talk a little bit about the tariff design side of things. So I'm going to show you a few slides before we get into the Excel tool. I did send it out to those of you that put your email addresses in the chat earlier. If you didn't receive it, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. I will send it out again so you can practice in your own time. It might be good just to follow along. But basically now, once you've designed your tariffs in the rate design dashboard, you can then head over to another tab called the tariff schedule. It's right next door to the rate design dashboard. You'll see a big table that looks a lot like this. And basically, it shows you your tariffs that you've just designed. So in this case, you can see it. I designed to have a basic charge that's about 10 Rand. I've got a high and a low season demand charge. You can see it over there in Rand per kVA per month. And I've got time of use and seasonal energy prices here. So you can see for high season off peak, this is how much I'm charging. For low season off peak, this is how much I'm charging. So it's a nice summary of all of your tariff design and how it affects every different customer category. Further down on that tab, you'll see this tariff schedule concise. And this shows you the existing rates that are in this blue section here and your new rates. So you can see for every customer category what the basic charge is, the average demand and average energy rates, because if you've got seasonal or time of use tariffs, it's difficult to represent that there. So this is an average. Plus, when it's all rolled up into a cents per kilowatt hour charge, that's what it looks like. And then over here, this is the interesting part in my opinion, is you can see from your current rates, the revenue you would be making based on your customer numbers and the forecasted sales to those customer categories. And then over here, this is the revenue you would be making with your new tariffs, the ones in this green box. So you can see for each customer category how much more or less you'll be making compared to the previous year. So that's quite insightful when you are looking at your revenue recovery. You can get an idea of how close you are to meeting that and where your shortfall might be coming from. And once you've looked at that, you might now be thinking, okay, I see how it affects my revenue, but how does it affect my customers? And this is a very important step when it comes to customer engagement. And we've got a recording of a previous session that we did a few months ago where Chris Gower also presented and told us about Buffalo City's rate impact policy and how they handle the customer engagement. And in the tool, we've got a similar sort of customer impact analysis where you can see how your proposed rates will affect your customers. So on that tab, the rate impact results, which is close to the tariff schedule, you'll see you get to this dashboard. So you can click on this drop-down list and select the customer category that you want to analyze. And then you'll see here this yellow cell. These yellow cells, as we saw in the Kahoot, you edit them, but it's also a nice visual cue of where you need to be looking at data that you can change. So what you're looking at here is that customer's monthly consumption. So based on this study, it found that domestic conventional customers typically consume about 859 kilowatt hours a month. So what I suggest is that you put in that number here in this yellow one. Then you scroll down a little bit more and you'll see that there's a few more yellow cells. And don't worry if this isn't making sense just yet. I'm going to demo it in a little bit. But you can then do the same thing with the load factor. So for this customer category, the average load factor is about 30%. So I would change this to 30%. And then you want to analyze customers' consumption or customer impact on varied consumption, because not every customer is going to consume 800 kilowatt hours a month. Some may consume more and some may consume less. So let's say you want to see just a rough spread. So you put in 500 kilowatt hours because it's kind of in the same ballpark as this 800. And then you have steps of 100 kilowatt hours. So let's say you start with 500 kilowatt hours and then the next step is 600 and then 700. And you'll see these graphs change based on your inputs. And something that we've done and that the developers of the tool are going to hopefully expand a bit is we've added, I forgot that I'd animated these, but we've added a rate impact results tab, which is next to that. And this allows you to see how the customer's bill is affected based on those selections you made on this previous tab. So You can see here, I've selected, in this case now, the domestic prepaid customer. I've made my monthly consumption 500 kilowatt hours, load factor of 30%. These you don't change. These are pre-selected. If you want to change them, you click on these links. And then you come down here and you can now analyze the customer impact. So you can see with my existing rates over here, let me just animate them for you. With my existing rates, previously I had a basic charge of 25 Rand, and for 200 kilowatt hours a month, if my domestic prepaid customer consumes this much, they would pay about 566 Rand for that energy. And their total bill is 591 Rand. If a domestic prepaid customer consumes 800 kilowatt hours, in my existing rates, they still pay that same fixed charge, but they're now paying 2,264 Rand for their energy. With the new rates that I've decided to build, you can see I've reduced the basic charge from 25 Rand to 10 Rand. I've implemented a demand charge, and I've reduced the energy charge. So you can see it for 200 kilowatt hours, it was 566 Rand. Now it's 408. But overall, the bill is higher at 686 Rand. So you can see there's a 95 Rand difference on the customer bill if they consume 200 kilowatt hours. If they consume 800 kilowatt hours, you can see again, without going through them step by step, their bill is increased by 424 Rand. So within this customer group, depending on how you consume, it may affect your bill differently. In this example, it's a pretty linear case where the more you consume, the more your rates seem to grow from last year to this year. You can see at a low consumption, it feels a bit like a 16% increase from last year, but high consumption, it feels more like an 18.5% increase. So these are ways for you to test your new rate structure, especially, as well as the increase that you're proposing, and see how it affects your bills. Basically, you can toggle these different, or you can pull on these different levers in terms of rate structure so that you can tend towards cost reflectivity without actually affecting their bill as much as if you just increased by a set percentage and didn't change the rate structure. So that's something that we want to look at with the practical exercise now. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through the tool and see how the tariff design affects the customers. So let me exit this. All right. So if you can all try and follow along with me, if you could open up this tool, just if you are having trouble, just put it in the chat and Megan will inform me. I can't see the chat as I'm sharing, but Megan, can you give me an indication, or could people put thumbs up when they have got this open and they've got to the rate design dashboard year 2? It's quite near the end. If you right click on this arrow here, you can see all the different tabs. So I would come down all the way to the rate design dashboard. We're going to be working here. So come to the rate design dashboard year 2. Megan, does it look like everybody's getting there?
Well, there's a couple of thumbs up that you've also seen. No one's squeaked on the chat that they're struggling or anything.
Okay, good. So as I mentioned earlier, if you, for whatever reason, are not able to open this, or you're struggling to open your emails, don't worry. Just follow along. You'll be able to play on this in your own time. So just to introduce this tool to you, it is the cost of supply tool that we work with a lot. It's not the most up-to-date version. That's actually going to be released in the next week or two. So this is the version that most municipalities would have used for the most recent tariff submission, but we are implementing a few updates. So as soon as that new tool comes out, we'll let you know. And it won't change that much. It will be more or less the same. There'll just be a few nice new tweaks. So what I've done, you don't have to follow me here, but I've pre-populated it. So you can see there's some financial data here. There's some commercial inputs. There's Eskom. Someone asked if we use Munich Flex. I've used Munich Flex rates, but we'll go into that in more detail during the tariff training coming up in 2 weeks. But basically, you can see this municipality is under recovering by about 29.9%. We've been through how to analyze these graphs. These are the exact same ones I had in my slides. But now we're going to get to the tariff design. So you can see here, I've decided I could have made this 5% for all the categories if I wanted. I could have decided that we actually seriously undercharging these people, so I'm going to make them 10%. But what I'm going to do is make everybody a 10% increase because it's just a nice round number. You can see, for example, we're going to work with the domestic customers in this session this morning. You can see how the domestic prepaid customers were previously under recovering by about 47%. This increase now has reduced that to negative 42%. So this is typically where most municipalities stop with their tariff design. They say, we want an increase of 10% because Eskom increased by 10%. So we're just going to copy them. And NERSA approves the 10% and then they move on. But there's a lot more you can do if you decide to get into it. And what I'm going to do here is just hide these cells so you can see. So now this is where I want you to follow along. If you've designed, if you've got this open, you can choose a 10% increase for domestic prepaid and domestic conventional customers. Then come down to the rate structure inputs. And this is what I showed you in the slides, but we're gonna play around with it a little bit. So what I want to do here is I want to make my variable, so my energy costs, I want to make that 100% of my bill. So you can see that I'm not charging these domestic customers any demand charges or any fixed charges at all, okay? I'm also going to go down to time of use tariffs, and I'm going to make this false. I'm going to make sure that this is 0, make sure that this is 0. We don't want anything else. It's just a flat rate, okay? I'll give everyone a second to do that. I'll actually run through it again. So in the row 85, rate structure inputs, your domestic prepaid and domestic conventional over here. In column N, make that 100%. So we're only charging energy rates at the moment. Also, as I said, no time of use. When you go now to this tab, the tariff schedule year 2, it should be right next door. You'll see we're at the tariff schedule year 2, and there should be in domestic prepaid and domestic conventional, it should be 0, 0, 0, 0, and only this charge here. It's a flat rate. So we're charging our customers in the domestic prepaid customer category, we're charging them R3.24 per kilowatt hour all day long. You can see for the domestic conventional, it's R3.17 all day long. You can see that again here. If you look at the tariff schedule, I'm just going to highlight it for you. You can see there's no basic charge, there's no demand charge, only an energy charge. And you can see the existing rates, there actually used to be a basic charge, and we've decided we're not going to charge that for this example. But because of my 10% increase, you can see I actually am still, I'll zoom in a bit for everyone. I am still earning more revenue than I was with my existing rates just because of that 10% increase. So that's something to think about, okay? And now I'm going to say, all right, my plan was to earn, let's say, in this customer category, I wanted to earn 140 million. So I see, all right, I'm closer to that, but I'm not all the way there. Maybe I can't get all the way there in one go. As Siatemba was saying, they've decided to move towards cost reflectivity over a 10-year period. If you were to just become cost reflective tomorrow, I think the customers in this category would get quite a shock, and I don't think they'd be very happy about that. So now that we've done that, we'll go to the rate impact results. And you'll recognize this from the slides I showed. You can see, hold on a second, or maybe my dog doesn't like that we charging customers so much, so he's just barking. But you can see here, you can select a customer category, and I'm going to select domestic prepaid. If I select another one, let me just select a random one, you'll see how this average changes. So based on my data that I've inputted, the model has calculated what the industrial customers consume on average. So we'll see in this one, what I've done is I've said equals, and I've clicked here. It just means I don't have to type every time. Anytime I change this, it will change it. So what I'm going to do is go to domestic prepaid. In this customer category, in my municipality, so it's my data, the average consumption for this customer type is 214 kilowatt hours a month. You can see, because of my flat bill structure, my bill impact doesn't change no matter the load factor that customer has, because there's no demand charge that we have. If I come down a little bit more, you'll see the load factor for this class is about 30%. I've again done this formula here. So let's just change this to, let's say, industrial again. You'll see the load factor here is about 50%, but for domestic prepaid, it's 30%. So now, like we said in the slides, I want to see on that sliding scale of consumption how the bill might change. So let's say I'm going to say 300 kilowatt hours is a rough estimate for the start, and then 100 kilowatt hour increments. So then on the very next tab, the rate impact summary, this is where you go. I'll just zoom out a little. You can see, let me just zoom a bit more. There's a very similar to the tariff schedule, very similar table. It just shows you your new rates again and your existing rates. The change, you can see the change here is of 10%. We shouldn't be surprised by that because that's what we designed. And then the revenue comparison. So this is just a little summary of the changes you've made, so that when you're looking at the individual tariff consumption view, you can quickly compare it at the top. So what we can see now in this dashboard, and also, by the way, if you want to change this, don't change it there. You can see that's a formula. It's not a yellow cell. You can click on this link, and then it will allow you to to change there. So you can see what we've done is that 300 monthly consumption, that sits in the middle. So if I show you here, this is a formula that links to there. So we can see what consumption would be like below that 300 and above. So for our example here, a customer that consumes 100 kilowatt hours a month, they'll spend 324 Rand purely on their energy charge. With our existing rates, they would actually they'd pay a bit less, but they are paying a fixed charge. And what you'll see is that the difference in their bills is only 16 Rand. So that's quite a palatable increase for low consumption customers. They probably won't complain about that. As consumption increases, you can see the difference in the rates from last year to this year starts to grow. So at 600 kilowatt hours a month consumption, the bill is almost 13% more than it was last year. And that equates to 222 Rand. The reason why we think that this is quite an important column is because percentages can sometimes seem a bit abstract, but when you see the Rand impact, you can anchor it to something that makes sense to you. So for this customer category, maybe 200 Rand is just too much of an increase. But how many of these customers actually consume more than 600 kilowatt hours a month, considering the average was closer to 200? So these are the sorts of things that should be going through your head as you do the impact. So now we've got this base example. I hope that everyone's following along. This is now where we're going to play around. So go back to the rate design dashboard and go down to row 85, the rate structure inputs. Is everyone following along so far? Give me some thumbs up. So if you have a problem, let Megan know. Seems, I assume everyone's going all right.
Yeah, there's no specific question as such in the chat, Nick.
Okay, all right. So then let's try another experiment now. Let's look at, if you click in the domestic prepaid column for the energy charges, these variable charges, and say it must be equal to this over here. This is the cost reflective, according to the study's results, the cost reflective tariff. Let's do that for both the energy and the demand charges. Click it, and what you'll see is that it has to add up to 100. So this last column, you don't even need to edit. It does it for you. So you can just calculate it like that. You can see now, because I've selected demand, previously this was 0, and this is black. If I make this equal to that, or even if I just type in something, so let's say I just type in 40, this will stay yellow. And this means that I can choose, do I want the demand charge to be per kVA of maximum demand or per kVA subscribed? These are fine nitty-gritty details that actually don't really apply to us too much. So I would suggest just leaving it as the maximum demand that's metered for that type of customer. I think that'll be more simple for your billing system. So now that we've done that, let's head over to the Rate Impact Results tab. And let's keep this as domestic prepaid. And like I said, make this equal to J24. So the consumption will be equal throughout. You'll see now the graph has a different shape. I'm not going to get too much into what the different shapes mean, But just remember, previously in that example, we had a flat rate and it was just a line that was straight. Now you can see that there's a curve. When you see a curve like this, that means that depending on consumption, the bill could be quite different. As we go down, we won't need to change these settings. I think that they are fine the way they are. And then we can go over to the rate impact summary here too. You'll see now, it's very similar to the tariff schedule. I've now got the summary of my charges for this domestic prepaid. You can see I've now built in a basic charge, an average demand charge, and an average energy charge. Last year, I didn't have a demand charge. You can see my energy rate is actually lower in my new charge than it was last year, but my revenue is still higher. Then I can come down over here and see how it will affect my customers. So again, you can see just a summary of what I've selected. Domestic prepaid customers, we're going to start with 300 kilowatt hours a month, load factor of 30%, and let's see how it affects them. So a customer that consumes 100 kilowatt hours a month, you can see they spend, no matter what consumption, their rand per month, their fixed charge stays the same. It's 10 rand. Their demand charge has gone from nothing to 134 rand. And their energy charge has gone down because it's a cheaper rate. However, their overall bill is up by 40 rand, which is 13%. As you get to higher consumption, you can see now the bill has gone up by 314 rand, which is an 18% increase. So if you think about those curves that I mentioned on the previous graph, as their consumption goes up, you can see the bill increase goes up quite quickly at first and then kind of flattens out. But we're never going to get a domestic conventional customer that's consuming 2,000 kilowatt hours a month unless the meter's been bypassed. I think that's quite unlikely. So that's something that we need to think about. So is this in my municipality acceptable to charge customers that consume 300 kilowatt hours a month? Is it acceptable for their bill to increase by 150 rand from last year? That's a 17% increase. That would be probably quite unpopular. And this is where it's very important in rate impact, is you, in your tariff design, you technically only increased the rates. Oh, I must unhide these to show you. You technically only increased their rates by 10%, but the impact that they feel when they consume 300 kilowatt hours a month is more like a 17% increase. So 10% isn't 10% all across the board, which is why I said percentages can sometimes be misleading. What it really boils down to is they'll be paying 150 rand more. And that's now where you have to balance fairness and equity into your cost reflective tariffs. So it's quite an interesting example. So now I want to show you just one last example. Let's say now we've looked at this and we've said, no, this demand charge, it's really going to hurt these customers. So we go back to the tariff design, just hide these again. And we say, okay, I think that we must make the fixed charge higher and demand charge must be, you probably wouldn't, just as a caveat, you probably wouldn't charge domestic customers a demand charge, but for the sake of this example, we're gonna use it. But don't blame me if customers get charged a demand charge and they aren't happy about it. I'm not saying you must do this. This is illustrative only. So let's say I make this 20% instead of 30, and now I'm going to just make this 60% so that it's more of a round number. So now the fixed charge has increased from about 1% to 20%. Let's go. Remember, we don't need to change these. All of these are already pre-selected, but you can see that the bill has the shape of this graph has changed. Remember, before it was going up like that. Now it's going down. So this might be something that could be desirable depending on your customer, if you're looking at it from a customer perspective or a municipal perspective. So for a domestic prepaid customer, you can see now last year their fixed charge was 25 Rand. Now it's 139 off the bat. So before you've consumed a single kilowatt hour, your bill is going to be 139 Rand. So that means for low consumption customers, their bill increases a lot. However, as your consumption goes up, the difference in what you paid last year compared to this year gets much lower. You can see because the energy charge is lower, their bill doesn't grow as their consumption grows. So that's sending a signal to the customer that you should consume more electricity because it's more worth your while. So this is, or can be, the unintended consequences of your tariff design is the signals you send to your customers. So that's something to consider as well. What I'm telling my customers here is that you must consume as much as you can, because if you save energy, you're just going to pay a lot anyway because of the fixed charge. But if you consume lots, it's actually cheaper the more you consume based on the rate structure that I've designed. But it also means that if you've got a lot of, let's say, solar power, or you've got an excess of energy supply, you would maybe want more customers to consume, especially during certain times of the day. So then you could start to factor in time of use tariffs. It gets very interesting the deeper down the rabbit hole you go. But you can see that by implementing a higher fixed charge and lower variable charges, we've completely flipped the way the tariffs work. So if I go to the rate design dashboard, and let's just do another example. Let's say I make this 80 and leave that as 20. So there's no fixed charge. Let's see these graphs first. You'll see now it's got a different shape. It kind of goes quite quick and then more or less plateaus. So if I see here, the customer's bill at a low consumption, it's only 26 Rand more, but as the consumption increases, the bill will grow in the difference from this year to last year. If I go, let's say I want to see, I know that my domestic prepaid customers are not going to be consuming much more than 600, but let's say I want to test that theory. Let's say I put in 1,000 here. So these are now domestic prepaid customers using a lot of energy. You'll see my graph has changed. You'll see how we're starting to see that plateau that I spoke about. For every 100 kilowatt hours that it goes up, their bill is increasing by 0.1. So it basically means that after a certain amount of energy consumed, it doesn't matter how much more you consume, your bill is going to change by more or less the same rate. So it's going to be pretty similar. However, it is still 17% more than it was last year, which means that it might not be acceptable to begin with. So let's just put this back at 300. These are all things that you can consider. And the intention with this rate impact summary is not to say you must or mustn't do something, but it allows you to interrogate the rate design from a customer's perspective and take into consideration your municipality's unique circumstances, and then design the tariffs around that. If you know, so let's just change the customer category to domestic conventional. If you know your domestic conventional customers are actually only the high income suburban customers that all have solar panels on their roofs, and you're not charging them a fixed charge, then there's the potential that their bill actually goes down, but you could also be losing revenue from them. So let's just make their consumption a bit, let's make it 600. So you can see that at low consumption rates, their bill actually decreases. And even as their consumption increases, they're not feeling big increases here. Even though my energy rate has increased by 10%, they're only starting to feel that 10% increase over 900 kilowatt hours worth of consumption. So now you could go back to the rate design dashboard and remember we are now working with the domestic conventional. Let's change this to be cost reflective, but maybe with a slightly lower demand charge. So let's make this 15%, just a random guess. Let's make this 65 just to be a round number. So now let's see how let's say my suburban bigger houses with solar panels on the roofs are looking. Now their bill has increased considerably. The fixed charge is much higher. And even though the energy rate is lower, that the demand charge has really changed how the bill is. But what we can see is that as they consume more, that the feeling of the increase flattens out. So let's say we start with 800. You can see that once you get past 800, that's the difference between last year's tariffs and this year's tariffs is getting smaller. So again, you're sending the signal that, I mean, you either don't want to use any electricity, or if you're going to use it, use more, because it actually gets cheaper the more you use. It's kind of a reversed inclining block tariff. So these are the signals you would be sending to your customers. So this is something that's really fun to play with, and you can do it for every customer category and see how it affects them. So it's a nice visual way and a practical way to understand these changes that you make in the rate design dashboard. So that's why, let me just unhide these again. And that's why I encourage everyone to not just stop at this step where we say Eskom increased by 10%, so we're just going to do the same. Rather, carry on and look at how these breakdowns per customer category affect your overall picture. So you can see now I've got big fixed charges in my rates here because of how I've been playing with them at the moment, and that's probably not going to fly. So I'll have to adjust my tariffs accordingly until you get to something that resembles cost reflectivity. As you all know, it's a mantra that we repeat a lot. You just need to tend towards cost reflectivity. You don't have to be fully cost reflective for every customer category. That's where cross subsidies and FBE and all of those sorts of things come into the equation. So this is more about understanding your customers' consumption patterns, the signals that you send them, and how it affects their bill at the end of the day. So this is an introduction to the rate impact summary, and we will cover it again in the training in September. But it's definitely something that I think municipalities need to spend more time on, because if you're going to engage with your customers, and whether it's through a road show or a newsletter or something, this is what they actually care about at the end of the day. They're not going to look at your cost of supply results and say, okay, while my wires business in the high season does this and that. They just want to know how it's going to affect them in the pocket. So that's what you need to be able to tell them. And you can explain why these sorts of changes have been implemented because of the way they consume energy. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions. And Megan, jump in as well if you need to.
I'm not seeing questions in the Q&A, Nick, but I wanted to abuse a position as co-webinar host here and just say, I really wanted to re-emphasize what Nick has just said about this tending towards cost reflectivity. So cost reflectivity's got multiple meanings. On the one hand, it's saying you must raise enough revenue to cover your costs. So that's at the very first level of it. And then the other level is saying, obviously, we need to unbundle so that the nature of the costs reflects the drivers. Otherwise, you run the risk, particularly as we move to more and more of a liberalized market, you run the risk of losing revenue because you've bundled things. So that's a big one. But I think what Nick was also illustrating, which is so important, and I think Siatemba did also, is that the percentages are a highly misleading thing. You can see why statisticians deal in percentages often, because you know what might be like a percentage increase in one group, it might represent a large volume of money in terms of that group's income level, for example, whereas in another group, a percentage increase may represent a smaller increase in their income level. So you've got to also look at the income level of customers, and you've also got to look at the total revenue impact. And then just to say, in closing, I did post, I don't know how good the article is, but it's a World Bank article on sort of global pricing design. And I think it's important to say that globally, what that article says is that in over 60% of countries and over industrial customers are charged a higher rate than residential, and in over 80% of countries, commercial customers are charged a higher rate than residential, even though they are cheaper to serve very often. So residential customers at the bottom of the network are responsible for all the costs upstream, and they're responsible for quite a lot of peak costs. So they drive a lot of costs, but that globally, it's very, very much the practice to lift a bit of that burden off residential customers. It's just in terms of access, affordability, you know, particularly universal access, it wouldn't be acceptable to dump that whole burden on residential. So it is very common to have cross subsidy. So I think we know we don't want customers to defect. We know that a regulator needs to look at fairness and equity as well. And I think to any implication that you should be doing 100% cost reflective would probably be quite detrimental in a country like South Africa with extreme inequality. So hopefully utilities will become experts in kind of what is global good best practice, and hopefully the regulators also will have a deep understanding of that. Thanks, Nick.
No, thank you, Megan. And I think that was a nice way to summarize a lot of this. Many of you will be familiar with the struggle of balancing all of these things, juggling a whole bunch of people's opinions and considerations. But I think this tariff impact tool is one way to kind of bed down those concepts for you. So in closing, I'm just going to share my screen one last time. I have this, I know I didn't show it earlier, but I hope that in that Kahoot, the date questions would have helped you. But basically, we've got a little calendar of kind of how we're expecting to see the cost of supply process go. And I know that Gary mentioned in the previous webinar that the calendar has changed from what some people were familiar with. But basically, this top row here, this is the municipal sort of cycle. Finish your year end, and then basically from now and through to the end of this calendar year, you want to be already filling in your cost of supply tool. So I've sent in the chat our cost of supply tool training, which starts on the 7th of September, and that will run from 9 until 12, like today's webinar, for every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And each day we'll step through the tool, starting from data inputs, going all the way through to rate design and tariff impact. This is where you can join us, but instead of using tools that have been pre-populated with data, you'll be using your own data. This is for two reasons. One is so that you can practice using the tool and become more familiar with how it works. And two is so that you will have a populated cost of supply tool that you can then update as you need to, say when you find out when Eskom or what Eskom's increase is going to be, you can update that and you'll know how to do it. The reason why we're running this is because we know most municipalities won't be able to get a consultant to do this for them. And truthfully, you don't need a consultant to use this tool to do a cost of supply study. There's more than enough support and resources out there to help you do this on your own. And having done many of them, I can attest to the fact that it's not as complicated as it seems, and we're going to really try and help you as much as possible during that week. So as I said, we're going to do the study in September, and then you can start looking at how these tariffs are going to look. You'll get a pretty good idea of what you're working with, and then you can start looking at how to engage customers and how to present your tariffs to council, because what you want to avoid is starting 2027 on the back foot, because come the 20th of March, you need to submit your tariffs to NERSA. And those first 2-3 months of 2027 will fly past. And it's better to have a lot of the bulk work done before going into that December holiday period. Once you've submitted, then NERSA is going to assess these. You'll have to do some public participation, and by the 5th of May, NERSA is going to have a finalized decision on your tariffs. So it's a lot earlier than maybe some municipalities have been used to, submitting quite late in, say, June. So you need to be thinking about March as your submission date, not May or June like it might have been in the past. So this will be, as I share the slides tomorrow, this will be around for you to look at, but this is kind of how we see the calendar shaping up. It might change, but I think this is the key date to remember. And you'll see in the chat, I've popped the training and the registrations for each of those days, and everyone is welcome to sign up for that. Megan did mention in the chat as well that if you are in the Northwest or the Free State and NERSA is doing their road show, you might not be able to attend our training, but not to worry. We will share the videos, And there are already videos on YouTube on how to do the cost of supply tool, and all the resources are available on our website, and we'll share all of that with you. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to say. Megan, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I see that there's some questions in the Q&A that I'll answer.
Oh, nice.
And then, yeah, other than that, I think that concludes our day.
Nick, I think I'll hand back to you to do the Q&A, but just to say that we have NERSA has shuffled the start of their roadshow workshops on Thursday the 10th, so that the people can attend COS in the morning and the roadshow will only start in the afternoon. Friday we haven't been able to change it, but just to say people will only miss that one day from Free State or Northwest. So we've got a bit of a compromise there. And yeah, there just was absolutely no other way to do it. And then lastly, just to say for those people who can't read the chat, there's obviously this question of, but if we submitted a COS last year, do we need to redo it? And we're essentially saying yes, and at least it's the model so that it's not like redoing an entire cost of supply. But as per the very first webinar that Zibusiso held, NERSA is seeking that people apply the rate of return method on the wires business. So unless you did that, which at least 17 of you I think have, or some of you have done that, then you're okay. But if you haven't, then we really would encourage that you come to this and redo that cost of supply. And I think the other thing is that every year we're still in the learning stages, and every year the model gets deeper and better, and every year your understanding of completing the model gets strengthened. So it's a lot of PE now, but I reckon in the coming years we will get into that nice kind of 3-year mode, and it'll be less onerous. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Megan. So there are a few questions in the Q&A. So one from Chris: does our rate table account for time of use tariffs? This current one that I demoed today doesn't, but the plan is to have a time of use functionality as well, because obviously, especially with industrial customers where you would maybe already be charging them a time of use tariff, it will help to have that view as well. So we would like to include that, but for now it doesn't really include that at the moment. And then you also asked for the FBE tariff design. Can you see the equitable share? And you can see that in the cost of supply results. So if you go to the cost of supply results, you'll be able to see how much has been allocated to FBE in terms of subsidies, what the true cost is to serve those FBE customers, and you'll be able to see if there is a shortfall. So they cost X, but you only receive Y. You will be able to see that, and that does factor into the design of the tariff. So in that tariff design tab, the FBE is already factored in there, but maybe I can do a deep dive video on how that works, so you can interrogate that in a bit more detail. I might get to doing that in the next few weeks, because it does take a bit of time to explain. There's lots of tables and sheets and everything, but it does consider that. And then there was one about Munich Flex, just to point out that the way the cost of supply tool works is that whatever the Eskom tariff of the moment is, the one that you get charged, that's what you enter in the data input. So we'll cover that on day 1 or 2 of the training, but it does consider Munich Flex. There's also a question about inclining block tariffs. We don't account for inclining block tariffs because they they're basically getting phased out, and to rebuild the tool to include them, it was deemed unnecessary by the developers of the tool. And what we basically recommend is that, let's say you charge an inclining block tariff for your domestic customers, and you have 3 blocks. One is 0 to 50 kilowatt hours, then it's 50 to 300 kilowatt hours, and then it's 300 and above. You would input the rate that is most applicable to that customer group. So let's say that customer group usually consumes 300 kilowatt hours and not really any more, then you'll use block 2 as your tariff. But we'll also go through that during the training. See, there's a new question. Would the model consider a generation business? So Chelsea, not in its current form. We in discussion with the developers on future-proofing the tool, but with them being consultants and with this being a GIZ-funded project, we have to get all sorts of things scoped and signed off, and we would like that, but at the moment it's not got that functionality. However, we would like to make it as robust as possible, but right now it doesn't have a generation side of it. Just while I can see there's some more questions in the chat, but there is a poll that's come up. Would you mind filling it in? It's only 2 questions, just to see how everyone's feeling after the webinar. If we see that you said you were somewhat confident, and then after the webinar that you were no longer confident, then it means that I'm going to get fired. So you're welcome to say that, but I'm hoping that it would probably be the other way around. But thank you to the 25 people that have already responded to the poll. We do appreciate it. Your responses and your feedback definitely get back to the funders and hopefully convince them that this is the sort of area where more funding is required to help municipalities with their cost of supply, their tariff design. So any and all responses to the poll really do help us. Thank you, Audrey, for attending the webinar. We look forward to seeing everyone again in 2 weeks. You get a break from us next week, so enjoy that as well. George, we have uploaded the recordings on YouTube. If you go onto YouTube and you search for Sustainable Energy Africa, you'll see there's a cost of supply playlist. And I think Megan actually put it in the chat earlier.
I did put it in the chat earlier, yeah. George, if you scroll up, you should find it. Let me.
Yeah, so all the recordings will go up. The recording of this session will go up tomorrow. And I'll reply to it, Megan.
Okay.
Then you can catch up in the meantime. I know I mentioned it, maybe you missed it at the beginning, but we have all of the individual sessions of how to populate the tool broken down into videos. So if you want to know how to do your Eskom tariff inputs, then you can search for that specifically. So you have another question from Chelsea. Will the cost of supply training possibly look at the asset register component in more detail? I was wondering when to move from historic cost book value to current replacement cost or depreciated replacement cost for the regulated asset base. How prior depreciation is already recovered through tariffs and should be treated. So Chelsea, we did do an asset register session, but we will cover that again in the training. Some of that is a bit outside of our jurisdiction, and we would look to NERSA there to give some indication on the best way to move across from historic book cost to the current replacement costs. and how to treat depreciation already recovered through tariffs. We wouldn't know how to update or redesign the tool until we got some direction from policy. So, Megan, I don't know if you want to add to
Yeah,
that.
I don't think that I think the tool is absolutely fine whether you're using historic or current replacement cost. And I
Yes.
think the modeler tool that we demoed is quite useful for if you want to do current replacement cost. It's been updated to include some of that. I think though, Chelsea, that we've sort of noted through the sessions we've had over the last 2 months that there is a kind of a call for almost an asset masterclass that goes one level more into the detail of how to do the depreciation and quite a lot more detail that, as Nick said, is a little bit out of our remit. It gets into we'd probably need to involve National Treasury and stuff. So that I think is on the cards potentially. I mean, it's not set up yet, but the concept is definitely been noted. So I don't know how much we will be able to help in the next modeling session, though. Yeah.
Yeah. As you said, Megan, I think the tool at the moment is pretty good there, but
Yeah.
policy needs to inform us on where to go with the assets.
But I mean, Chelsea, one of the things that I think we we did it sort of internally, but a thing that we would highly recommend is that using the modeler tool, you can actually look at your current assets on the historic value and what it would look like. You can just dummy it quite quickly and easily to see what difference it would make on a current replacement cost. And what we picked up is that, it makes quite a substantial difference to your revenue requirement, probably an increase of about 7 to 10%. So you can look back at, I know you were on that call, but you can look back at Zibu's use of the modeler tool. We could also take you through that, Chelsea, and it is quite useful to see. The most important thing is that as soon as possible, you should get to a current replacement cost value. And it will push tariffs up. So you may again want to have what AI calls a glide path, possibly.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. A question from Doc Valentine as well. When will Munich expect the revised tool to be available? It should be available before the training, so in the next 2 weeks, and we'll share all of that ahead of time. For those of you that are still on the call, you don't have to stick around any longer, but just a heads up, we will be giving you homework so that you arrive prepared for the cost of supply training. It's like this was high school, and that's going to be university, where the pace increases. So
Radical
you need to be
self-reliance
ready.
is required.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe also just a word to those who are still on the call. We've done online model development with municipalities in-person sessions. We've never done a full modeling session 5-day like this online before. So we hope it's going to work well. But as Nick has said, it does really require that you come ready to develop your tool. Don't come and think I'll just listen in, because then you may as well just listen to the videos that Nick's already uploaded on how to do the tool. So come with your tool ready, come ready to be doing it in, it's a very practical working exercise. And we hope we can work it so that it works for all of us. Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so I just saw someone said they can't see the poll, so I'm going to reshare it. But I think after that, I officially closed the meeting, and thank you everyone for joining. And we will be in touch, and you know where to get hold of us if you do have any questions in the meantime.